Hi, everybody, and welcome into episode 3 of the Transgender Show. My guest tonight is Ashley Coooper, writer, director, comedian, and as of Saturday, Twitch affiliate. She established herself as a filmmaker to watch after she produced and directed the short film Interview with a Time Traveler. It raised 163% of its Kickstarter goal. It has been watched over 1 million times and been featured on some of the biggest film sites, so it's pretty easy to find out there. She's also worked on many scripts adaptations for TV and video games. Ashley Coooper, thank you so much for joining us, and welcome to the show.
Hello!
Woo. With the things that you do, it kind of struck me that fear doesn't seem to be a big issue for you. Is that true?
I think it's less that it's an issue and more that I do it anyway. I'm still afraid of doing things. I've just learned to not let that stop me.
What are some of the significant fears that you've run up against in your life?
I am not a big fan of this mortal coil I've been stuck with. I have a lot of complicated feelings around my body, around my face, around my voice, around all these things. And yet I still put myself in positions where I'm shoving a camera in my face and I'm speaking to audiences full of people that I don't know and stuff like that. And it's kind of, it's not, but it is sort of exposure therapy for me,
Mm-hmm.
The more that I do it, eventually I'm hoping that it'll just stop bothering me. You know what I mean? Like if I keep just pushing myself and putting it out there and facing it, eventually it'll just be a non-issue and I won't think about it anymore.
Mm-hmm.
I haven't gotten to that point yet, but that's the goal to be continued.
Yeah. Well, I got to assume that with doing stand-up comedy, that's got to be a big issue there. Has doing that kind of, that's pretty similar, but how has that forced you to get better about overcoming the fears?
Stand-up comedy is one of the best decisions I've made in my entire life. It has taught me so many incredible things about just owning who I am and taking control of a space, and even in a room where I have no idea who the crowd is or how they're going to react to me or my material, to go up there and to confidently deliver those first few jokes to get a gauge of the room. I think it's something that I've started taking into my personal life as well, where I've stopped asking for permission to exist in spaces that aren't necessarily labeled or advertised as safe or friendly spaces.
Mm-hmm.
Because in the Toronto comedy scene specifically, and I'm sure this is the case elsewhere as well, but I haven't really performed outside of the GTA, so I don't want to speak for the rest of the country or the rest of the world. There is a pretty great and thriving queer comedy scene here. And so as a result of that, there are producers, there are venues, there are shows that are kind of by default space and are by default safe and advertised as such, because they're shows that have queer producers, they're shows that have all queer lineups or majority queer lineups, or are advertised specifically to queer audiences. And when I first started doing comedy, I was doing a lot of those shows and having an absolute blast. But I knew for myself, if I wanted to be successful at comedy and I wanted that to be something that I could pursue in a more substantial way, I had to appeal to more than the people that were already bought in, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
And so I started doing shows at shitty pubs that were around the corner from subway stations in, the more conservative neighborhoods and stuff like that. I started pushing myself outside of my comfort zone and being like, I need to be able to dominate those rooms.
Mm-hmm.
I need to make those people laugh. That's how I know this is working. And here I am 2 years and over 200 shows later. Wow. So if I didn't push myself to do that and to put myself in situations where I had the potential to be uncomfortable, where I had the potential to fail, I would never know where the ceiling was. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. it kind of mirrors what we need to do in public space, just in general life. Like,
Absolutely. Yeah.
At
It's
first,
kind of a microcosm of just navigating the world as a trans person. It's like you can't not go to, you can't not go to the mall because you're afraid of getting side-eyed. Like if you let fear stop you from doing everything, you'd never leave your house.
yeah.
Or at least I wouldn't. Like I don't want to speak for everybody, but like it's hard out there. Like,
but I think that's very common
yeah.
for trans people, to have that fear and to do that. That's why the term closeted exists, because it's metaphorical for homosexual people, but it seems kind of more literal for trans people, that we pretty much only get a chance to dress up in the closet or in the bedroom with the windows closed, with the blinds closed and all of that.
Yeah.
I remember.
I mean, no, I can't relate to that at all. I don't know what you're talking about.
I just remember when I started, like I had some clothes and I would go out to a beach to run my dog, and I would like change and I'd put on some clothes or whatever, and I'd have like a padded bra under a hoodie in the dark, like in my car, and I'd be terrified when at a street light that cars next to me could tell that I was, quote unquote cross-dressed, that I was wearing a bra under all of that with nothing else, no makeup, anything like that. And it's just, yeah, that fear just keeping me from doing anything. How did you get into the stand-up comedy? Where did that start?
So I got into comedy because of crippling depression.
Again, something completely uncommon and unique in the trans community, right?
So basically, I went through this period. I can no longer remember specifically what triggered it, but it was dysphoria related. It was transition related. It was general nebulous unhappiness related. I went through this really terrible period of depression that lasted about a week or better, where I could not get off the couch. I couldn't stop crying at random intervals. I had no drive. I didn't want to do anything. I was just a husk. Mm-hmm. And I kind of slowly started coming out the other end of that. And as I did, I had this very clear thought to myself that I needed to find a way to take some of the power away from the things that were bothering me, or someday they were going to kill me.
And where was that in your transition?
That was a year. Yeah, a year, around a year from the period where I had come out to myself, and just shy of a year to having come out publicly.
Okay. And were you on hormones at this point or anything? Was that a factor?
Yes.
Yeah? Okay. All right.
And so, yeah, I don't know if it was part of like my body catching up to HRT, or like what the chemical cocktail that led to that particular episode was. But I thought to myself, I need to take some of the power away from this. And one of the easiest ways to take power away from anything is to laugh at it, is to make fun of it, is to poke it. And so for the next little while, when I would walk my dog, I would have the leash in one hand and my phone notes app in the other hand. And I would write out these little rough ideas of jokes, and eventually came out with a very rough version of what eventually became the first stand-up set that I would ever perform. Mm-hmm. But at the time, it was just a thought experiment. It was not intended to actually go out and perform it. I just wanted to get it down on paper. I wanted to see if I could, in fact, flip the narrative and look at it from a different perspective. But after I finished it, I sent it to a friend. A friend of mine who's also a comedian. And I was like, hey, like you would appreciate this. Like, this is what I've been up to. Because he's my best friend. Like, he knew the struggles that I'd been going through. He knew that it had been a week since I'd gotten off the couch and stuff. I was like, this is my little, self-imposed therapy assignment. This is what I've been up to. Mm-hmm. And he was like, oh, this is not, for your first stab, like this is not bad. I'm looking forward to seeing you perform it. And I was like, oh, no.
Pump the brakes a little bit.
I was like, it was just a thought experiment. I'm not interested in performing. That's not me. I just wanted to see if I could get it down. And he was like, okay, cool. Well, yeah, like he's like, I like it. And gave me a little bit of feedback and stuff like that. I didn't do anything with it, didn't have any intention to do anything with it. But 2017 was the year that I had come out. And so I spent that entire year very much insular. I was spending a lot of time inside, thinking, and all of those things that you do kind of in early transition, figuring myself out again. And
Take two.
I really didn't do much in 2017. Like in terms of like, if you could like list off, you know, how did you spend your year? Most of mine would be like crying. Just, I didn't do a lot. I cried and I went shopping.
So much.
So I was like, in 2018, my goal is going to be to do one thing a month that I can be proud of. It can be really small and personal. It can be a big professional goal, but I want to look back on this year and say that I accomplished something for myself. And so that meant I needed to fill 12 spots on the map, on the calendar. What are words? I'm a writer. I had to fill 12 spots on the calendar. And so I came up with a couple small things to get the year started. It's like, I'm trying to fill all of these months on the calendar for my accomplishment a month goal. I was like, since the comedy thing is already written, I thought that could be one of them. And
in December,
I was like, do you know anybody who would be willing to put me on like the opening spot of like a shitty pub show somewhere where my friends could come and laugh at me or with me or whatever, one and done, you know what I mean? Like just in and out, no big deal. And he was like, yeah, I can probably wrestle something up. Give me a couple days. A couple days come and go. And he gets back to me and he introduces me to this producer who's putting on, I shit you not, a queer comedy showcase in 2 months. And I was like, what part of shitty pub show opening slot did you not understand? I was like, I am not an emerging queer comedian. I'm like, this is literally like a bucket list sort of thing. Like I'm just doing it. Like I'm just to do it once. And he was like, you'll be fine. And so I accepted the spot because I didn't want to make him look like an asshole for recommending me.
Okay.
I didn't want him to have put himself out there and then for me to be like, actually, I'm just kidding. Because that would make him look bad.
Yeah.
And then so I was like, well, shit. Like, I was like, I wasn't taking this seriously before. Like, this was just going to be like a one and done, no fuss, no muss sort of thing. I was like, now it's a showcase that's being like really well advertised in the area. I was like, now I have to like really put effort into this. And so I started going to an open mic every week leading up to the workshop and just running my set over and over again and then recording it on my phone so that I could listen to it in my headphones on the way home and hone it and tighten it and rewrite it for 7 weeks leading up to the showcase. And then went up, did the showcase, and was like, I need this. This has been missing from my life.
Wow.
And just didn't stop. And just kept doing shows, and it kind of became this perpetual motion machine. More shows begot more shows, and I started getting booked on bigger. I got booked on bigger shows. Eventually I got the opportunity to open for Shasir Zamata from SNL. Okay. I got to open for Cameron Esposito. Like, I got all of these incredible opportunities. I got to showcase for JFL last year, which was amazing. And just like, not in a million years would I have asked to be on that show, but I was put in a position where I could take what was offered or let the fear step me back. And I could have been like, no, there's been a mistake. I just want to do a shitty pub show. And then who knows where I would have been if it would have taken hold this strong, and I mean, comedy doesn't currently exist because none of us are outside of our house. but I've been chomping at the bit to get back to it because I immediately fell in love with it.
Nice. So what were your topics to start with in your comedy, in your initial bit, and then kind of what have you evolved to?
A lot of the stuff that I started out with was about personal personal issues that I was having with my transition, and then the material grew into tackling systemic transphobia, turfs. Basically, my entire performance is built as a trans 101.
Okay.
You can walk in the room having never met, spoken to, educated yourself on trans people in any way, shape, or form, and by the time I get off the stage, you can leave a little more educated on the subject.
Hmm.
Um,
So
it is
you do a
very
funny
much
version of this show.
basically like I very intentionally keep in the back of my mind that every time I get up on the stage, I'm the first trans person that somebody in that audience has ever seen in person.
Mm-hmm.
And I have an opportunity to change their mind.
So with that, how are you received as a stand-up? And like, so I'm assuming you say you kind of address that, but do you find that it's really necessary to kind of have warm up to get the crowd over that initial, I mean, for lack of a better term, shock, you know,
My warm up is literally me coming out to the audience through a joke. I literally just dive right in
mm,
because one I think it simultaneously, and this seems like a bit of a cop out and a little bit of a cliche, but I feel like my biggest strength and weakness as a comedian and comic performer is that I don't have an out. And by that, I mean, you'll see really, really tight, well honed comedians who will go up and start doing a certain set of jokes, and for one reason or another they may not be connecting to the audience on that particular night, and you can see them very deftly switch subjects to try to get the audience on their side.
mm-hmm.
uh, and they basically just pivot and change their strategy. I don't have that.
Yeah.
I have a very specific thing that I'm there to do and a very specific goal and very specific material with which to do it. So if you're not on board, the ship is going down with us both. Like,
Okay.
But I think that has also served to my benefit because, again, I don't give myself an out in terms of the fear. If I'm getting tepid response at the beginning, I can't chicken out and revert to like, so how about airplane peanuts? You know what I mean? Like
What's the
I
deal?
have to go full throttle through this set. And I mean, I can count on one hand the number of absolutely terrible shows that I've had, I think.
Wow,
You know,
that's
where I've
impressive.
just gotten off the stage and just thought like, fuck me, why did I leave the house tonight? And I think a big part of that is that I do my best not to talk down to the audience.
Mm.
You know, I don't go on stage and say, here are all the things I expect you to know. I say, here are all the things that you don't know, how they're dumb, and why that's funny. And I think it's because it's a perspective that not a lot of people have heard from before, and there's still a novelty to that.
Mm. What's your response after the show? Do you get a lot of people coming up to you and saying, "Oh my God, you changed my perspective, you changed my life"? Those kinds of heartwarming stories.
Had a lot of really great experiences post shows, and there's two that particularly that stand out that I hold very near and dear to me. The first is the obvious one of trans people in the audience who who came to the show because they heard there was going to be a trans comedian, or who were shocked and surprised that there was a trans comedian, and that they were so excited that they were able to relate to the material, and oh my god, I've had that happen too, and stuff like that. And that was what I thought I was after when I first started. I was like, I want to be the representation that I don't currently have in the
Mm.
world. I want to take up the space that I wish I could see myself in. And I still love that, and that is still very fulfilling. But what I didn't expect, and what I think is equally fulfilling and just as important, is cis straight people who come up to me after the show and say, I have never heard anybody talk about it like that before. I think I get it now. Or I went to this comedy festival last year, and it's in not the most progressive city in Ontario, to be kind. And like to the point where like I got to the address that was on the Facebook event that had been sent to me, and I walked in the door, and it was 400 cisgender white 40-year-old couples in a banquet hall. And I immediately left the building and walked around the entire perimeter, convinced there must be another entrance because there was no way that could be the room that I was doing comedy in tonight.
Something wrong here.
Was.
Wow.
It was the room I was doing comedy in that night.
Was that one of the ones you can count on your hand, or
What's that?
Was that one of the ones you can count on the one hand?
It was not, surprisingly. I went in convinced that I was going to absolutely eat shit. Sat at the table with the other comedians, just dreading having to go up. Went up, killed it. And then after the show, this couple came up to me, and they were like in their mid-30s or something. They weren't of the older fare that seemed to take up the majority of the audience. But they came up and they were like, we're so glad that you came tonight, because I guarantee nobody in this room has ever seen a trans person in the flesh before and only know of their existence through like fucking Fox News and shit.
Yeah.
And you humanized that for this entire room of people tonight. And I could tell by the reaction of the room that you changed minds.
Wow.
And I was like, I had no idea how to take it. Like I was not prepared for that. I didn't know what to do with it. And it just sat with me for the rest of the day. And I was like, well, shit, if that's an option, I think that's the goal now.
Yeah.
Because every single opportunity that I have to make life a little bit easier for the next trans girl that this person meets is an opportunity I've got to take.
That's great. I've got some questions here in the audience. The first one was, can we hear your opener?
All right, it's ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, guys, gals, and non-binary pals. My name is Ashley Coooper, and I came here tonight to share with you a secret. In case these hips, these shoulders, and this voice haven't yet given it away, I'm trans. And that's how every single one of my 200 some odd shows begins.
And that's there you go. Now we're in. Do you get a response from that? Do you get a laugh from that, or then do you go into something else?
I get a laugh or applause. Depends on the day. Depends on the room.
Nice. Okay. But not a lot of crickets after that one, huh?
No.
Have you ever had issues with confidence while you're performing? Like, when I'm I'm in Toastmasters, and I find that I will hit a bump and I'll lose my train of thought of where I was going, and then I freeze, and that's where the fear really comes in. Do you run into that, and how do you work through that?
I have really weird experiences with performance anxiety, because kind of going back to what I mentioned before, where I don't give myself an out, I have the material so deeply ingrained in my brain that I have found myself thinking about the anxiety that I'm having and what to do about it, and coming back to the material 2 jokes later, like my body's been on autopilot.
Nice.
Like trying to figure out, like, is there a joke that I can swap out for this thing, or is there, because like I have a very specific structure to my set, but they're built each section of the set is built on themes, and it's almost modular, where I have certain jokes that can be lifted and replaced with things. Like if I, get going into the section of the set that's about transphobia, for example, I have a multitude of jokes about very specific instances of transphobia, and depending on how much or how little set time that I have, I can choose which ones go in there. But because it's still, the little microcosm is about transphobia, it still fits as a whole in the greater span of the set.
Yeah.
And so I will be working out all of that stuff while dealing with the actual performance aspect of it, and not paying attention to what's coming out of my mouth, and then deliver a punchline and have like that 2 seconds to be like, oh, right, I'm literally up here doing this right now.
That's amazing.
And then kind of just keep going.
Wow.
But I will say, I am like heart in, throat nervous right up to the point that I grab the microphone every single time. Like, because I don't consider myself a natural performer. Comedy is this weird outlier in my life, in that in every other aspect of my life, I don't tend to want to be the center of attention. I don't tend to want to be the focus. I would rather, hide in the corner of a room and drink by myself than to like engage with strangers at a party. Like, I'm that kind of person. Typically, I'm much more introverted, and so it's very strange that comedy opened up this little micro extrovert in me. But I have to kind of like force myself onto the stage every single time because I get like that like full body adrenaline anxiety experience, and it's just like go like every single time. It'd be so easy to turn around and run home. Like
okay, so the feelings I had before the start of the show today are totally fine.
Absolutely.
So let's get into your history a bit. When did you first realize that you were where you were different? I'd like to start there, and then we'll ask about trans.
When I was 8 years old,
wow.
I used to love playing. I would play like make-believe games on the playground, like you do as a child. And when I was a kid, the biggest thing in the world, and the biggest thing in my world, was Power Rangers. And I very distinctly remember when we were picking our characters to play, I desperately wanted to be the Pink Ranger, and inherently knew that I couldn't say that out loud.
Yeah, I have a memory of that. That always kind of sparks one thing. As you get older, you just have these little flashes from your childhood. I remember specifically, and I don't know how many times we did this, but doing the make-believe thing, and it was like playing sort of like a house type of a thing, not in the creepy way, but I vaguely remember kind of wishing I could play the mom, but I always ended up being the dog. I feel like when I was
3 genders, mom, dad, and dog.
Yeah, I think I felt most of my life that it took me a long time to realize that I was trans and that I was different. I think I felt that I was a boy and that was just the way it was, and so I had to do the things that were in that. Thinking outside of that was never an option for me. So it's kind of interesting to look back and see these little breadcrumbs that actually were there that I never realized because it wasn't an option for me.
Right.
So you were 8 and you started seeing some of these things. When did you first realize you were trans? When did you first identify as that?
Like, when did I come out to myself?
Yeah, just when did you realize that that's what it was?
That would have been October of 2016.
Okay. So that was when you came out. Yeah.
So I was 31.
Okay. Who was the first person you came out to?
My best friend, actually the comedian from the story from earlier.
Oh, awesome. Who was the hardest person to come out to?
My parents. Not because I thought they wouldn't be supportive, but because despite all of the evidence that they would, I was terrified that I was missing some telltale sign and that they wouldn't be anyway.
Mm-hmm.
Because when I first came out, I came out to myself on a weekend. I was living with my partner at the time, and I came out to myself on my way home from having visited family on a weekend when my partner was working out of the town. So I came home to an empty house and just had to like sit in it. And did what I think most people do, was I went to the internet in search of support. And I found this message board, and this message board did way more damage than it did help, unintentionally. Because all of the stories that I found there were stories of divorce, of excommunication from families, of being fired, of all of these terrible, horrible things. And some of these stories were like, I thought my partner was going to support me, and we're separated and she's filing for divorce. Or it was, I always thought my parents would be in my corner and now they won't talk to me. It was like, and I was like, well, I think my parents are always going to be in my corner. Am I wrong?
Yeah.
And I had no evidence to support this, but you, in those early days, are so afraid of what's going to happen the first time that you say it out loud.
Yeah. Well, the problem is that, like you were talking before about, most people have never met a trans person. It's the same thing for us. Like, so we don't know ourselves.
Yeah. And for me, I had this overwhelming fear of like, you can't put the toothpaste back in the tube. Like, up to this point, from 8 till 31, I have so many breadcrumbs that I can trace back and be like, oh, that was a moment where the egg cracked. That was a moment where the egg cracked. That, like, all the way through my entire life, and some of them in hilariously obvious, overt ways that it's like, how did you end up back? Like, how did you end up repressing that afterwards? It was so obvious, and it's like the brain is a magic thing. But
yeah, brains are great at denial. My God, brains,
yeah,
like, if they excel at one thing, denial is it. I swear.
That's it. If I am talented in one thing, it is that. I can't remember what point I was making now. We were talking about my parents.
Yeah, just the message board that you found, the first thing that you came and how damaging that was.
So I just got all of my fear just was piled onto you with all these other stories, and I had no reason to believe that my parents wouldn't be supportive, but I was so terrified that they wouldn't be. So I came out to them last before I came out publicly to everybody. Not because they were less important, but in fact because they were the most important. And if for any reason that didn't go the way that I was hoping, I needed all of these people to catch me. Because I came out to all of the people that I thought were safe bets, basically, first. All of my closest friends, who I had like a moral certainty to who they were and what their character was.
The people that you've done really stupid and terrible things with or in front of, and that like that was okay. So let's see if this goes well.
Despite the fact that I had chosen people specifically for that reason, it never got easier. I thought it would get easier. It never got easier, which is a big part of why I come out to every audience at the beginning of my show, because that was the most visceral fear I've ever felt in my life. Every time I sat down across from somebody to come out to them.
Yeah.
And I was like, no, now you work for me. And so I chose all of these people, but despite that, it was still so stressful every single time, including coming out to one of my best friends who has trans siblings. but every single time I just got this overwhelming stress, and like I would like hunch over. My body was so like contorted from the stress of it.
Mhm.
And then I eventually came out to my parents, and they were like, okay. And like they took a little while to adapt. It's still a big change, you know. 31 years is we'll be polite and call it habit forming, you
Yeah.
know. um and so it took a minute to catch up and to adapt, but they've never once faltered in their love for me. They've never once not had my back, and my mom's gone to bat for me when members of my family have messed up my pronouns and
Wow.
stuff like that. Like, she's my biggest supporter. Like, she would go to war for me.
Oh, that's amazing, and that's
um
so important that to have the family structure behind you. The friends are great and everything, but
100%. Yeah,
the family with their unconditional love, it's that's the most important one, and that's why it's so
absolutely.
devastating to hear that so many trans people don't get that.
Yeah, I know that I am extremely fortunate in that situation. And it kills me that that's not the default.
Hmm. Well, yeah, my coming out to my parents has been extremely weak. It's been very tepid and timid, because of those same fears. And I feel like when you do that, you don't make the picture clear enough for them, and you don't. It just makes it kind of harder for them in a way. But then,
Oh
I
yeah, I
still,
totally fucked it up when I came out to them. I was
mm.
so bad at it.
Well, because we don't
Like,
know. I think it's the
yeah,
situation that it's going to be because we don't understand it ourselves. We're trying to figure it out, but it's hard.
yeah, and it's like, how do I put this in how do I put this in like a easy to understand way? How do I answer these questions without rambling? You know, but it was so hard to get out every single word. So like I would just like answer with the most minimum response that I could manage, and I was just so full of anxiety. I was like, eventually, like I was like, I spent the entire conversation waiting for the other shoe to drop, and it just never came.
That's amazing.
And then because I fucked that up so much, it took me that much longer to make up that road later.
Okay. Yeah, I'm still dealing with it. I'm still getting the questions of like, "Are you sure?" It was so funny because I've been dressed full time for so long around my family and all of that, and because of the furlough, I was talking with my dad about looking for a job, and just straight faced, he was like, "Are you're gonna look for a job like that?"
Oof.
And I'm like, "Yes, yeah." And so it's those kind of backhanded sort of things that are still the little
Yeah.
jabs, and I again really kind of tepid with them because I cling to that whatever support and whatever love I can get for them. That I told my dad that basically what I need from you guys is just open the door when I show up, open the door, and as long as that's it, then as long as we have that, then that's what I really need, and hopefully that we can build beyond that at some point. But I'm just trying not to press it too much because I know they're traditional, they're older, it's hard for them. Again, no trans
Right.
experience whatsoever, so
Yeah.
it's tough. Um, did you have any support from people you weren't expecting once it kind of came out more and more? Like for instance, at work, I the president of our company, who I wasn't even sure really knew my name, pulled me into his office shortly before he left the company, and he was telling me that he's not only impressed but really kind of inspired by the courage I have and being myself. And I'm like, this is the president of the company. This is a guy that just has
That's
balls
amazing.
for days, and has run you know massive Fortune 500 companies and all that. And he's saying this to me, so like it shocked me. Have you had anything that surprised you like that?
Funnily enough, also my boss at the time. I was working at a production company as a television commercial producer at the time that I came out. And I had been there for 4 years at that point. I'd worked my way up from being the owner's assistant. And I came out to him, and he was super supportive and cool. And that I was like, yep, expect that. he seems like a chill dude. Was not expecting him to like kick me to the curb or anything. Also, I'd made myself extremely valuable at that company, so they really couldn't just kick me to the curb. I knew too many things and nobody else knew. uh, but he went so far above and beyond just giving me a thumbs up and being like, cool, Ashley, go change your email. He had the company's publicist draft and publish a letter on the social media pages for the company, basically saying, you know, this is Ashley. She just came out. She's been with us forever, whatever. She's awesome. And he was like, that is a statement to weed out anybody that has a problem with that. He was like, because it would be a pain in the ass to have to go around and email every single client that we deal with.
Mm-hmm.
He's like, but we're going to do that loudly and publicly, because if any of them have a problem with them, they can take their money somewhere else.
Wow, that's an amazing amount of support.
Like I just like anime waterfall cries, like.
Oh wow, yeah, that's amazing. That's an amazing level of support. So yeah. How far along would you say you are in your journey currently?
I came out on January 6th, 2017, and I started hormones on May 13th of 2017. So 3 years, a little over 3.5 since coming out, and a little over 3 since starting HRT.
Are you looking towards surgeries or anything like that?
I had surgery in September of last year.
Okay. Well, there's multiple surgeries that trans people go through, and I was just wondering if which one
that's fair. I had bottom surgery.
Oh wow. Okay. And I'm
very fortunate that in Ontario it's covered by our universal health care.
Wow. And that's the only one that you've had? No facial feminization or top surgery? Wow.
Not covered.
Oh, not covered. Okay. All right.
No. Weirdly considered electives, cosmetic.
Okay. I've heard from other trans people that the HRT made the biggest change and the biggest validating kind of affirmative changes to the body, and then that the surgery, the bottom surgery, is kind of the icing on the cake. Is that kind of what you found, or was it more significant in kind of validating for yourself your gender?
A really good question. For me, I think it was just I would have rather had the surgery than not. It was more about the psychological effects than the physical ones for me, I think. Mm-hmm. And I think that goes for the biggest changes in terms of HRT as well. Like, I found that they helped, like that process was, the benefits were more psychological than they were physical. Like, obviously there are physical changes, but like I just started to feel more at home in my own body afterwards. Mm-hmm. And in like a weird nebulous way that I don't necessarily have form for the words of.
And I think that's again goes back to how you describe how you're feeling to people. It is very nebulous. It's really tough to put your finger on what it is that you're feeling. It's just wrong, for lack of a better term. I realized this kind of recently because I was trying to describe it to somebody, and it's like it's not even feeling like you're a square peg in a round hole. It's just that you see the round hole and you see that it's not right, but you don't know why and you don't know how. Yeah. So it's great to hear that those things really kind of did help you feel like, okay, this is starting to fit now. I just had my first endocrinologist appointment, the initial consult on Friday. So I'm gathering lots of
Congratulations, that's huge.
Well, thank you. Now I have to go visit a sperm bank because I figure I should kind of save that just in case.
Sure. Yeah.
I
That's
have
not uncommon.
no freaking desire to do that, though. Of all of this, I think that's probably the least thing, the thing I'm looking forward to the least. I don't know how you do that. But we'll try. We'll give it the old try, and we'll see. Anna said that, by the way, that she can confirm, having been out with you, that you are in fact an introvert, despite those of us that might disbelieve that from seeing you on your stream here and in your comedy.
Yeah,
So,
that's fair.
have your transition goals shifted as you've moved along in your transition? Like for me, I had fears of doing anything that was permanent, and so I kept hitting up against that wall, and then now I'm finally starting to kind of get over that. And so I feel like it's just been a progression as I've gotten comfortable with one level, let's say, then moving on to the next level starts to seem like the right thing to do and feels good. Is that have you experienced kind of that? A
I
better sentence?
haven't really had, I haven't really ever set up like quote unquote transition goals. Um, I just kind of ebb and flow as I go.
Mm.
Um, like I wasn't interested in surgery until I was, and then I just kind of like went through the process of dealing with it. It wasn't so much that like as I was coming out, I was like that thing over there on the horizon. I want that. I have to go get it.
Mm-hmm.
It's more that like I'm just walking down a path, and eventually I come to forks in the road, and I go, okay, that's the direction I want to be in. Um, it's a much more kind of like there's more flow to it rather than like a charted destination, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, it totally does. And I've kind of found that like I was listening to a podcast, and Ron Funches was talking about having a what's the board? Vision board, where you visualize all the things
Yeah,
that
sure.
you want, and so I started to kind of, put.
See, for me, the reason why I've avoided having like quote unquote transition goals is because I'm deeply afraid of failure, and I can fail to achieve a goal.
Mm-hmm.
So I just kind of my brain hack is like, don't set goals. You can't fail to reach them.
Interesting. I think that's contrary to what a lot of people would teach us, but I think in transitioning, it's really important to have that. I think that's the one case where it's really important because I put this picture of this beautiful thin woman that looked amazing in this sundress, and started to kind of look at that and have that, and then I realized, and especially in joining this community and getting more involved in it, I realized that that's really stupid. And you're like you said, you're setting yourself up for failure because we have no idea what our bodies are going to do with the hormones,
Yep.
all that kind of stuff. So you're just setting yourself up for disappointment if you do that, So I love two things about yours, just the path, and where it leads is where it leads, and you make the decisions as they come up. And then also I like to talk a lot about what you said about ebb and flow, where if something feels right this week but next week it's too much for me, allowing myself to kind of pull back in that space and have that, and then be like, okay, well, we took the left fork this week now, or last week, but this week I kind of want to take a step back and look at the fork again. And then maybe I do end up going on the left fork, and now I'm ready and I just charge on it, or maybe the right fork is better.
And I think it's important to allow yourself that, to not be afraid to reevaluate things and to not consider every wrong turn a failure,
Yeah. So when was the first time you found a successful trans community that really helped and kind of bolstered what you were doing?
Probably not until comedy. Within the queer comedy scene in Toronto, there's a much smaller trans comedy scene. And by trans comedy scene, I mean me and like my 5 friends. But
scene.
It was fantastic to have other trans people who were confident enough in themselves to also be on a stage, and to see how we had all of these universal stories, but how each individual performer had their own unique takes on them, and how you could have multiple of us on the same show and we could talk about the same subject matters, but in such very different ways.
Mm-hmm.
and it was great having peers to to do that with. Whereas before, the only community that I had found was this program called Gender Journeys, which is put on by the clinic that I go to.
Okay.
And basically it's just you sign up for it, and I think it's 10 weeks, and it's basically like a weekly meeting where it's like, oh, so you're trans, now what? And like, I made friends there who I still talk to this day, but we were all so uncertain of ourselves and uncomfortable in our own skins, and so there wasn't a lot of empowerment in it, if that makes sense. It was very educational, it was very useful, but I didn't leave every week being like, fuck yeah, we got this. You know what I mean? Like,
Trans and proud.
Exactly, right? Like, but that's how I feel after every comedy show,
Oh, wow.
and how I feel after seeing, my trans siblings kill it on a show, I'm like, fuck yeah, and that for me, that was like the first time I had a community that I felt I was getting something really valuable and empowering out of.
What role has therapy played in your transition? Have you seen a therapist regularly at any point?
I did for quite a while, and stopped because unfortunately, like, I just became financially unstable and couldn't afford to. Um, but it was really good in the early days of my transition for kind of sorting out and giving shape to some of my feelings and anxieties. Um, and I mean, in all fairness, like, I should probably go back. Um, but it's just one of those things where I'm like, I should do that. And then in like 4 months, I'm like, wait, wasn't I gonna shit? Like, because time is an illusion.
Well, that and your whole anti-goals thing probably throws that out the window.
I don't know what you're talking about, and I don't like what you're implying. No. uh, but yeah, I found it very helpful. I think anybody that has the opportunity to do it should, trans or otherwise, because we've all got shit, we've all got shit.
Mm-hmm. So now, so far, I mean, I don't know. I would say that you're. I mean, now that you've had the surgery, like, as far as where you'd be in a transition, it sounds like you're done. You've reached the end. Congratulations, you broke the finish line. But what do you still find yourself dysphoric about these days, or have you gotten over that?
Have I gotten over that? Shit, I didn't realize there were two comedians on this show. Uh, no, I feel dysphoric about most things, to be honest. I do not have a good relationship with my body.
Wow. Okay.
I'm self-conscious every time I leave the house. I still very regularly get misgendered by store clerks and stuff like that. I have a lot of issues with my voice. I get misgendered on the phone all the time.
Mm-hmm.
But I bought a microphone so that I could be on Twitch broadcasting my fucking voice, because that's who I am as a human being.
Yeah. More of the fuck it here. This is what it is. Let's just this.
Exactly.
We talked a lot about on the last episode about, and I think with on the first one as well with Madison, about getting to the point of, like, it's not about passing, which, again, talking about transition goals, that's kind of what we all set out as our first thing that's just kind of inherent in being trans. It's like your goal is to be accepted and gendered correctly as a woman, not as a trans person or man. Sorry, I have not to be exclusionary, but you set out this goal and you want to pass, and that's what it is. And the true growth comes from getting to the point where you want to go out and pass as you. You accept that this is just who I am.
I am 6'1". I have football player shoulders. Not that I've ever played football, much to my high school football coach's dismay. I am very visibly trans. There was not a world where that was not going to be an option for me. And I threw out the idea of quote unquote passing a very long time ago. But what's important for me is being seen.
Yeah.
And when I'm misgendered by strangers, store clerks, whomever, it's not that I'm upset that I'm not passing. It's that I'm not being seen.
Mm-hmm.
It's that despite all of the markers to the contrary, you are able to look past all of the things that I am consciously telling you to see someone else standing in front of you.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what hurts.
Yeah, it's almost the willing, the willing or purposeful lack of acceptance. Like
Yes.
I'm responding to what you're telling me, and I'm telling you I don't give
And
a
I'm
shit.
ignoring it.
Yes, I don't give a shit. Not only I'm not ignoring it, I'm telling you that I'm going to purposefully go the opposite direction because that's what I have going on in me. People are wonderful. Yes. I find that I still have these days. Luckily, it's shifted a bit, but I still have the days no matter what I do to myself. No matter how much face I put on or dress or whatever, I look in the mirror and I still see a guy. And then there are other days where I look like a complete and total train wreck, and unshaved, all that kind of stuff, unshowered, and I still see Emily. And it's just kind of funny how, some days, like, no matter what you do, like I said, I still see a guy, and then other days, like, oh, there she is. And there seems to be no rhyme or reason to it.
Yeah, I think a lot of the times the best that I can hope for is the turning point where the scales tip in the right favor. And
it's just funny that
I don't know that it will ever go away entirely. And again, going back to the idea of goals, like, I don't want to think about the day that might be, because if it never comes, that's a crippling disappointment. But I just want to get to the point where I see Ashley more than I don't.
Mm-hmm. It's just so important to get to that and to have that perspective on yourself. It's funny that people in completely different phases of their transition still have those kind of things, because like I said, I see you. I see basically bottom surgery as kind of like the final step, and then and then that's it. Congratulations. I feel like I'm not even really halfway into my transition. I've been out dressing full time for about 5 years, but only came out as trans to myself and the rest of the world really recently, probably about a year or two ago, and just now starting to get comfortable, like I said, with the permanent changes, laser and hormone therapy and things like that.
Laser.
Oh, it sucks so bad. I had it on Tuesday,
and it hurts so bad.
What I wasn't expecting was the laser sucks, yes, but for an entire week after, shaving is horrible. And I don't know if that's an experience that you've had.
I haven't had to deal with that for a long time, thankfully. But yeah, I remember that.
Yeah, it's just like it won't shave, and your skin is just raw afterwards. It's terrible. But it's just funny because, like I said, I feel so much earlier in my transition, and yet I feel like we've kind of, crossed in how I feel about myself more. I've got that where I feel more Emily than I do see a guy in the mirror. So it's just interesting how no matter how our journey is and how far along it is in it, it doesn't indicate how we feel inside about ourselves. I think that's an important message for people out there that look at us as trans people, as out trans people, confidently presenting ourselves in the world, that you really can't guess or judge what's going on inside and how confident that person feels, and the importance of correctly gendering a person, how much it really means to them.
Yeah.
What was your experience with hormones? You mentioned that it really kind of helped affirm things, but were there things you weren't expecting? Were there kind of curveballs? Were there speed bumps and tough parts that you ran into?
Oh yeah, like I was emotionally volatile for quite a while. I was very emotionally fragile for probably like 6 to 8 months after after getting like into the full regimen, I think.
Mm-hmm.
And that made things difficult in like personal life situations and stuff, and dealing with my partner and things like that. And especially because I was able to start so soon after coming out. I was going through all of like those early transition, you know uh baby deer leg moments at the
Mm-hmm.
same time that my body's physiology was reinventing itself,
Uh-huh.
which was probably a lot for it to deal with all at once. Um,
I got to assume,
but
yeah,
I,
mentally and emotionally, that physically, mentally, emotionally, that's a
exactly,
lot to
it
go
was
through all
like
at the same time.
beset on all sides, you know.
Yeah.
Um, but it eventually it all kind of like evened out, and I was like, here we are, like smooth sailing. And it's been forever since it's really had any like noticeable impact on
Hmm.
me. I mean, I cry a lot more now, but it's might also because we hashtag live in a global pandemic,
Mm-hmm.
um,
Yeah,
and
the
just
world is
everything is
completely
on
sideways.
fire.
Everything.
Uh, like I was streaming a horror game the last few nights that I've been on, and made me cry 3 times, which is not something that I usually expect out of a horror video game. But there I was.
How do you feel that transitioning has affected your overall mental health?
Oh, undeniably in the positive. Like I would trade my worst day out for my best day prior
Wow.
in a heartbeat. There's just no competition. Even on the absolute worst dog shit fuck my life day, I would rather be there than be him.
Mm-hmm.
Fuck that guy.
Um, here's a tough one. We've sort of kind of addressed this or been around it, so feel free to tell me fuck off and we can move on beyond it. In what ways has transitioning lived up to your expectations? In what ways has it not? I mean, I know you didn't have like goals, but there's still kind of things that we hold on to.
There was I definitely feel like I was sold a false bill of goods by trans Twitter, where
Oh, that guy's an
I
asshole.
kept I kept reading these stories of how eventually you just turn this point where suddenly the majority of people stop misgendering you, and you're just read in the world as your gender. And I'm like,
Waiting, just waiting,
when?
sweetheart. Just
What
waiting.
o'clock? Like,
Yeah, time. I understand that time has no meaning now, but still, at some point, like when?
right? Like, but I would say that's probably the one thing. Like, I knew not to set specific expectations for, body changes and all those sorts of things. Um, and kind of just like you had to just let it do its thing and hope for the best.
Mhm.
But that was the one thing that I was kind of hoping for. That like eventually like I just wouldn't have to worry about it as much.
Yeah.
And we're still waiting.
Uh, so talking about your past and kind of eschewing the person you were before, uh, your career, I think, seemed like it was kind of just getting off and getting good. You directed and co-wrote, that wonderful short interview with a time traveler, along with having some other film credits that uh, that have that name related to it.
Yes.
Did you have fears that transitioning could jeopardize the momentum of your career?
Oh, it was more than fear. I was certain that I was committing career suicide by coming out. There's not a lot of examples of people that do what I do in the trans community, or at least there's more now, but there was very little 3 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so I was like, there's no place for me once I come out. And I was just kind of bracing myself for like, this is it.
And
And then it never came.
It didn't. Okay, so it didn't affect the work you get or the projects you've been given.
No, I think in a lot of ways, it's made me a better writer. Because obviously I am still the same person I've always been, but I'm more honest now in my work. I'm not dancing around things. I'm not trying to write through a cloud of doubt and uncertainty. I can own who I am. And when I am confident in myself, I am confident in my writing. And that makes it better writing.
Awesome.
And I can tell the stories that I want to be telling. I can draw clearer lines, metaphorically for the things that I want to be talking about. Because I spend I've spent most of my career in like sci-fi and the supernatural and stuff like that. And unsurprisingly, a big fascination of mine has been time travel and things of that, like things related to time travel and past lives and stuff like that. And after I came out, I was like, oh, that's why. Okay. Yeah. Like before I was just fascinated with it and I didn't have a clear understanding of why. And I think the work wasn't as good as it could have been because I was reading it through foggy glasses, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. How did you choose your name? How did you choose Ashley?
It was the name that my mom was going to give me if I was assigned female at birth.
Oh, awesome. That's cute.
Yeah.
Now, I think I saw in one of your credits, not one of your credits, but one of your social links, Ashley J. Coooper, Jay.
J is my middle initial, but Ashley, the letter J Cooper, was taken.
Uh-huh. Oh, so you just spelled it out.
So I just spelled it out.
Okay. Yeah, I didn't know if that was like, if maybe that was a reference to your, dead name. I don't know if you like that term.
No. It's just, it's my middle name. And so basically, my dead name may as well have been John Smith. Like, it was just such a common name.
Okay.
And it was the sort of name where, like, unless I was one of the first couple hundred people on a new internet service or platform, I couldn't get my name as my username. So what did I go and do? I chose the most basic bitch name you could possibly fucking imagine so that I could have the exact same experience all over again.
Hey, you got to keep your life consistent. You got to have those consistent moments in your life because so much other things are changing. So you got to find those where you can.
So yeah, I just couldn't just get at Ashley Coooper. I was like, okay, well, what about my middle initial? And they're like, also no. I was like, God damn it. Like, and I didn't want to be one of those people that had like, I didn't want to be like at Ashley Coooper 85 or something stupid like that. I was like, I hate that. So that's how I ended up with that.
How have you been received by colleagues and other people in the industry?
I have found nothing but support in film and television and games, at least as far as I'm aware. If anybody's got a problem, they haven't been bold enough to say so to my face.
Okay.
But I live in Canada, where we're all very polite when we're in the same room together.
Okay.
So who's to say? I have no way of knowing whether or not being out and being extremely loud about it has cost me employment opportunities, because people don't usually call to be like, oh yeah, we were looking for somebody for this, but when we realized you wouldn't shut up about how trans you were, we decided to go with someone else. Like, that doesn't really happen, so I don't really have a gauge of that. But I can say that, like, I've paid my rent every month since coming out, so I mean, that's worth something.
I say that's pretty significant, yeah. Has your focus on the types of projects you want to work on changed, and the types of materials that you feel like you want to write now?
I don't think so. I'm still very much attracted to the same types of projects, but I would say that I'm more conscious of why I want them. and the thematic resonance that I want to imbue them with, and the subjects that I want to tackle within them, and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I'm finding a much more clear line between the things that I am attracted to as an audience member versus the things that I am attracted to as a creator. And that's a very interesting and evolving conversation, I think, that every artist needs to deal with. It's like, just because you like coming of age teen dramas doesn't necessarily mean that that's what will sustain you as a creative person.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Um, and so for a really long time, I was kind of trying to square peg round hole, my career at the very earliest stages, because like I'm the kind of chick that, like, I bought Pacific Rim on Blu-ray and then watched it so many times that I had to buy it digitally because I burned the disc out. Like, giant robots punching giant monsters in the face just scratches every geeky itch that I have. But for some reason I shied away from stuff like that, and I shied away from the things that really kind of filled my heart, because I was like, if I want to be a serious professional, I need to be doing this kind of thing or that kind of thing or that kind of thing. And when I first started out, it was not what fills me with passion, what makes me so excited that I can't wait to sit down at my desk and work on this. It was, what do I think will sell? What do I think is producible? What do I think I could make within a certain budget, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And I found zero experience, or sorry, I found zero success with that model. The first project that I ever had optioned by a production company was a small psychological horror with a cast of 4 characters where one of them is a robot. And it scratched every geeky itch that I had, but I imbued it with themes that excited me as a creative person, and it got everybody real jazzed. And I was like, oh, I can actually have the things that I want. I don't have to pretend to be somebody else. And my brain was like, we won't think about that for a while. And I found ever since then, and especially since coming out, that path becomes much clearer every day.
So you kind of alluded to what the how that you figured out why the time travel thing was so important to you. What kind of are the kind of key things? Are there things that you wish that you could go back in time and tell yourself or have yourself do over?
Okay, I have a little bit of a story. So the short answer to that is yes. Basically, if I had the power, I would go back to 8-year-old me and be like, that's because you are the Pink Ranger. And I would do everything that I could to come out as early as humanly possible, with the hope that maybe I would be happier with the person that I am today. Because despite all of this and everything I'm saying, I am racked with a lot of self-hatred and a lot of guilt and a lot of all these other things that I have to tell to fuck off every day I roll out of bed. But, and this goes back to the idea of projects and things that are exciting to me as a creator becoming a lot more clear and focused after I've come out. Just before I had come out to myself, I started pursuing this graphic novel, and it was a time travel story. And it was this weird fusion of like 90s grunge music and time travel, and it was just I'm still in love with it so much. I'm still going to get it made someday, I swear it. But I was really excited by it, and I couldn't quite pinpoint the specificity of what I wanted to do with it. I just knew that I had to do it. And then I came out to myself and I realized what I wanted to do with it, because every time travel story is the same. It is the story of somebody who gains the ability to go back to the past to right a terrible wrong. That's every single mainstream time travel story you've ever seen. What I was excited to do was to tell a story of somebody that used time travel to eventually have to come to terms with the problems that they have in their past so that they can finally begin to move forward. And writing that movie and adapting that comic book became my kind of self-inflicted therapeutic exercise.
And
because I was not
Is that
no,
Interview with
that
a Time
was not
Traveler?
Interview with the
Okay.
Time Traveler. It was called Skip to the End. It was published by Heavy Metal Comics. It's incredible. I highly recommend you go buy it. But the original graphic novel follows that very traditional time travel formula of righting a terrible wrong. And in this instance, the terrible wrong is that the main character is a bass guitar player for like a Nirvana style band in the 90s, but in the present day he's completely washed up, has spent all of his rock star money, and is working as a bartender to pay rent, and he's trying to kick a heroin addiction. He's basically the prototype for has-beens. And this all his whole life fell apart when the lead singer from his band committed suicide, Kurt Cobain style. And he's basically spent the last 20 years what ifing. What if that never happened, so that the band never broke up, so that my life never went to shit? And he gets this guitar that mysteriously shows up at the bar, and he realizes that when he plays it, he can literally travel back in time to relive his glory days. And so eventually he learns that he's not just traveling back to relive the moments, he's actually going back to these moments, and he's noticing small changes in his present day. And so he sets out on this plan to use the guitar to travel back in time to figure out a way to stop his friend and lead singer from killing himself so that his life never falls apart in the process. But eventually he has to come to terms with the fact that it's not about him, that he has been spending the last 20 years blaming all of his personal decisions on this one incontrollable moment that he has no ownership over. He's been passing the buck for 20 years and is not taking responsibility for how he ended up in the situation that he's in. And I am not a 47-year-old washed up rock star, but I am that character in so many ways. And I could have never written that project without being able to look inward and without the ability to be honest with myself about my anxieties, my issues, and all of those sorts of things. If I was still looking at the world through foggy glasses, I would have just basically adapted it straightforwardly, and it wouldn't have the soul that it has now.
Where are you in the project?
It's written and ready to go, and I mean, we were shopping it around before the world ended, and so hopefully once everything starts getting back to business, we'll be able to start that engine back up again. But who's to say? So
did you write on Interview with a Time Traveler?
No, I came up with the story, and then I produced and directed it.
Okay. So you basically had the outline, and then somebody else did the actual writing for it?
Even less. I had... So there are two guys in a room. One of them's trying to convince the other that they're a time traveler. That's what I had when I talked to the writer the first time. Okay.
And how do you feel about that project? I mean, obviously it's had a lot of success. What do you think about? I mean, do you watch it?
It surpassed my greatest ambitions for it. It cost us like $5,000. It cost nothing. We raised the money for it on Kickstarter. And it was just born of this creative hunger that I had at the time, where I was like, I really need to shoot something, and it needs to be so logistically simple that if we can't get anybody to care about it and we can't get any money cobbled together for it, that I can shoot it in the backyard. I don't care. I just need to make something. And I was like, what's more logistically simple than two people talking in a room? And then it was just a matter of figuring out what they could be talking about that would make me excited. And I was like, one of them is a time traveler. And I took it to my friend because I knew that I would be directing it, but I really wanted to produce it as well, because at the time, this was just before I started producing for the production company that I was working at. And so I wanted to produce this short to be like, look what I can do. you should bump me up. I'm capable of more than what you're having me do here.
Mm-hmm.
And so I knew that I was going to direct it. I knew that I was going to produce it. I didn't also want to write it because I love the collaborative element of filmmaking, and I didn't want to be the only person in the room with a say. I wanted a collaborator. I wanted somebody to bring their own fresh take to it.
Okay.
And so that's why I sought out a writer for it. And I'm so glad that I did, because he took it in such interesting directions that I would have never in a million years thought of.
The prophet Elijah, or Elijah the prophet?
Yes.
What were your roles on that one?
I was just the director.
Just the director, okay. So someone else had the story and everything, and how did you get involved in that project?
I knew the guys that wrote it and really liked the script, and it got picked up by a producer who I kind of knew through the scene, and they didn't have a director for it. And I'd seen the stuff that the producer had made prior, and at the time all I had done is like really, really scrappy student shorts.
Mm-hmm.
And I saw it as an opportunity to do something a little bit more polished that would have me kind of kick me up a few rungs on the ladder, so to speak.
Mm-hmm. And that worked?
Yeah. That eventually led to Interview the Time Traveler. That's Elijah the Prophet. You can draw a direct line to how I was able to get the actors that are in Time Traveler because they liked Elijah the Prophet.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was surprised that the main actor in that is phenomenal, in Elijah.
Yeah,
it's a very fun little story. Somebody had asked earlier, the comedians in, the trans comedians, who should we follow? Who should we look up?
Oh, you should look up Alice Rose. She's absolutely hilarious. You should look up Kaya Green if you're into sketch and improv.
How do you spell Kaya?
Kyah. And then just green like the color.
Anybody else? Other than Ashley Coooper, of course. And I've got
I heard she's pretty funny. And oh God, what's my brain doing right now?
We've been at this for a while. I can see where it could be a little bit mushy.
Yeah, it's also really hot in my room.
Oh. So, you just recently reached affiliate on Twitch. Congratulations on that.
Thank you.
And you did it, you said in like 22 days, I think you said?
20 days.
20 days?
20 days, yeah.
How did you build up a following that quick?
I have no idea. I think it's just because I treat streaming like hanging out. Mm-hmm. I just want everybody to have a good time, and I want everybody to feel welcome, and like they can speak up and lead the conversation. I want everybody to feel included. I don't want anybody to feel like they're just screaming into the void when they send a message through chat.
Uh-huh.
And I think everybody likes my dog, so that probably helps.
Yeah, I'm surprised we haven't heard from Pancake today. Is he banished?
I had to lock him out. He doesn't understand what technology is. So as far as he's concerned, I just sit in the corner of my room talking to myself, and he hates that.
Or talking to him. He's probably assumes that you're like saying things to him, and he's just like, well, what?
So he barks a lot, and I just felt like that probably wasn't ideal for this situation. Yeah.
So back on the previous topic, Tatton Plays said that she wishes. Well, I'm assuming. Sorry for the assumption there. They wish they could go back at 14 to tell themselves to come out because their parents felt like this came out of nowhere when they did come out, and it's been something that's been building their whole life. Yeah.
One of the first questions my parents asked was like, "How long have you felt like this?" And I was like, "Since I was 8." And they were like, "We didn't see any signs." I was like, "I know. I tried real hard on that. Thank you." Thank you for the compliment. Like,
so I'm a good actor as well.
Yeah,
so you've got a phenomenal actor to add to your list of accomplishments there. Yeah, I think there's just so many reasons throughout our life. Like I said, So what do you have? What as we kind of wrap this up? What are some of the key themes? What are some of the main advice that you have for young and closeted trans people out there?
Fucking do it. The and this is gonna sound flippant, and I don't mean it to. The worst that can happen is that no one will support you. And let me elaborate on that. If when you come out, the people that don't support you were never actually your friends to begin with, because their friendship was conditional on a version of you that wasn't real.
Mm-hmm.
Them leaving is just the garbage taking itself out and leaving you with more room to create real, genuine bonds with people that appreciate you for the person that you are. The worst day that you will ever have after coming out is worth 1,000 of the best days that you have in the closet. Because
it's a bold statement.
The things that you're crying about and the things that you're upset about after you come out, they're all genuine. And there's nothing like that. There's no substitute for living your life genuinely. I believe that to the bottom of my heart.
There was a question from the audience that I didn't get to ask. If you came across discrimination and basically other crap that you deal with in the real world, do you take that as an opportunity to drop it into your act, into your comedy?
Yep. Yeah, there are jokes that I've written that are that directly come from personal experiences. Yeah.
Awesome. I've got a slide after this when we close down. I'll leave up for a while that has a couple of Ashley's social things and pages to follow. So hang out for a little while after we close here. But Ashley, what's next for you in the trans community and in your career?
Right now, I'm just wrapping up writing on Later Daters, which is a dating sim / visual novel that's on Nintendo Switch and Steam. You can currently get the first half of the game, and the second half, where all my writing is coming out in September.
Oh, okay.
And I'm on Twitch every Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday at 8 p.m. Eastern. Mm-hmm. Which is Toronto time, in layman's terms.
I don't know what that is.
Layman's terms?
No, Toronto time. I have no idea what that is.
Oh,
I don't know that planet.
You don't know that planet? And yeah, I guess maybe I'll get around to writing some more TV once we're allowed to actually make that again.
Mm. Yeah, they haven't talked about that. It seems like we're out in California, and there's a fair bit of California opening back up, especially in my community here specifically. But yeah, I guess TV's still closed down, huh?
Yeah, all production's still at a dead halt. So hopefully that'll get back up and running again soon, and I can get back to things. But until then, I'll be playing spooky video games and scaring the shit out of myself on Twitch.
And for some reason crying a lot with them.
Yes. Look, the last game that I played was unexpectedly heavy, okay?
I've watched a little bit of Ashley's stream. I'm kind of new to finding her, but it is really entertaining, especially when she plays a game that's set, miles from her house.
Oh my God. The last game, yeah, it takes place like literally a 25-minute walk from my house. That was wild. Was not expecting that. I didn't know that when I started it.
So yeah, that is at Ashley Versus. Like I said, I've got the things that you sent me on the card, but why don't you go ahead and send people to other pages? What other stuff do you want to promote real fast?
Sure. On Twitch, I'm Ashley Versus VS. On Facebook, I'm Ashley Coooper Comedy. And on Twitter, I'm Ashley Jay Cooper.
That is where I saw it, yeah. Because Ashley, the letter J Cooper and Ashley Cooper were both taken. She was too slow. Yep. Too slow. It's got to be quicker next time. All right. Well, thank you so much for joining me tonight, Ashley, and being my third guest on the show. Another phenomenal episode. And
Thank you.
I will
This is
see
a lot
you...
of fun.
Oh, good. I'm glad you enjoyed it. And we'll see you around the Twitch sphere.
Sounds good.
Thanks, everybody, for coming and
Have a
watching.
good night, everybody.
Sorry, yeah. You can say goodbye. Say
Have
goodbye,
a good night.
Grace. And yeah, thanks everybody for coming and watching. And like I said, stick around and you'll see her little promos there. And we'll see you next Monday at 7 o'clock for Erica Newgirl will be my guest. Love you guys and have a good night.